Look at that banana
Mmm.
bread. It was so good.
Mm, mm.
Thanks for suggesting I eat a piece.
Go for it. Returning now,
Where were we?
zooming
We
back.
were here in A Course in Miracles for Dummies. Look at that. Whew.
Well, now that we have a full stomach, we will be able to make it through this. It is impossible to seek for pleasure through the body and not find pain. It is essential, in spite of the banana bread, it is essential that this relationship of seeking pleasure through the body, yet finding pain, be understood. For this relationship of seeking pleasure through the body, yet finding pain, is one the ego sees as proof of sin. This relationship of seeking pleasure through the body, yet finding pain, is not really punitive at all. Pain is but the inevitable result of equating yourself with the body, which is the invitation to pain. For the body invites fear to enter, and fear become your purpose. It invites both. The attraction of guilt must enter with fear, and whatever fear directs the body to do is therefore painful. The body will share the pain of all illusions, and the illusion of pleasure will be the same as pain. And I don't want anyone to think that because I've read this, that I understand completely and fully comprehend what this paragraph is saying. Things like this just have to be read more than once. The note
Ditto.
helps.
Believing we are a limited ego body, we identify our essence as the body. The body arose from our belief in the separation due to our sin against God. Through our egoic special relationships, we seek pleasure, but these relationships always require sacrifice, which always results in pain. Pain is the natural result of the perceived limitation that is the body. The separation led to fear, and fear maintains the separation. Pain and the inevitable death of the body support the ego's belief that the separation is real.
So it all starts in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's the cause. And the body is the result. If the cause is removed, you don't have the problem with the body.
Is
It's
not
not
this
this
inevitable?
inevitable. Is not this inevitable that the body will share the pain of all illusions, and the illusion of pleasure will be the same as pain? Under fear's orders, the body will pursue guilt, serving its egoic master, whose attraction to guilt maintains the whole illusion of the body's existence. This relationship of seeking pleasure through the body, which inevitably results in pain, then, is the attraction of pain. Ruled by this perception, which seeks pleasure through the body becomes the servant of pain, seeking pain dutifully and obeying the idea that pain is pleasure. It is this idea that pain is pleasure that underlies all of the ego's heavy investment in the body. And it is this insane relationship that pain is pleasure that the ego keeps hidden and yet feeds upon. To you, the ego teaches that the body's pleasure is happiness. Yet to itself, the ego whispers, the body's pleasure is death.
Wow. The ego's thought system is tied directly to the belief that you're a body. To be a body, we gave up the union of oneness that was everything. To reward you for this decision, to deny our one self The ego tells us that we can find pleasure or happiness within the confines of the body. In the special relationship, the ego tells us that we can make ourselves whole or less incomplete by obtaining something from outside of ourselves. The special relationship usually requires some sort of bartering in which we must sacrifice something to obtain something in return. Conditional relationships engender all kinds of fears, but always confirm that we lack something and therefore are not whole. Unless the Holy Spirit can transform the ego's relationship, or can transform the ego's special relationship into holy ones, these relationships will ultimately result in pain. Even finding your soulmate will result in pain when one partner dies. Believing that we are the body, we seek pleasure in the body. But these relationships ultimately end in pain. Our pursuit of pleasure becomes our pursuit of pain. The motto of the ego remains, seek and do not find. Illusions are the ego's pursuit of happiness through specialness. This pursuit of these illusions comes at the cost of our oneness and the denial of God's love.
To take a 50,000-foot view of what we've just read, and thinking about the coronavirus right now, we are learning that we are all one and have to work in tandem with each other. And that breaking apart and moving this way and that way, separating ourselves from others, has brought this problem. And it's the height of duplicity that the ego, in a sense, now tells us that we have to keep isolated from each other. It's the height of its infamy and its destructiveness that we now even have to separate ourselves socially in order to survive. This too shall pass. We will once again regain our understanding through this current pain that we don't want that anymore. We don't want to be separated anymore. We really want to become one. That's my hope and my prayer, and how this particular paragraph speaks to me.
I think there's a little twist to it, and that's that the ego requires that we be together physically and in the physical realm versus a spiritual way of us all assembling as we have virtually. We can all be together virtually. There's no need for us to be alone, but it's important for us to be conscious and safe of how viruses spread. So I think we don't have to deny God's love. We just have to use the creativity, the creative ways that we found to connect in spite of a physical distance. Just like you and I are 700 miles apart.
And anybody who's looking at this YouTube is wherever they are. They could be on the other side of the globe.
And they could be time shifted.
That doesn't matter.
Years in the future when all of this isn't to worry about anymore. Hopefully we sailed through it.
Why should the body be anything to you? Certainly what the body is made of is not precious. And just as certain the body has no feeling, the body transmits to you the feelings that you want. Like any communication medium, the body receives and sends the messages that the body is given from the mind. The body has no feeling, for the messages it transmits. All of the feeling with which these messages are invested is given by the minds of the sender and the receiver. The ego and the Holy Spirit both recognize that all feeling in the message comes from only the minds of the sender or receiver. And both the ego and the Holy Spirit also recognize that here the sender and receiver of the messages are the same. The Holy Spirit tells you this, that the sender and the receiver of the messages are the same, with joy. The ego hides the fact that the sender and receiver of the messages are the same, for the ego would keep you unaware of this fact. I'm not going to say it a third time. Who would send messages of hatred and attack if he but understood he sends them to himself? Who would accuse, make guilty, and condemn himself?
I think the ego would. The body's merely a communication device. Through this device, our mind is constantly sending out thoughts of either love or fear. Our mind has no other frequency, since love and fear are opposites with no compromise in between. Any emotion other than love and fear are just fine-tuning into these wave bands. The thought systems that we follow will dictate which frequency of thought pattern we transmit from the body. The body, which is merely a neutral communication device, does not care on which frequency it transmits. The body will transmit on whatever emotional frequency the mind tells it to. The body has no power to edit or change what the mind orders it to transmit.
So the body is like a telephone. It has no power. It just transmits what's our message to the other end.
Our message on whatever frequency is chosen. And the chosen frequency defaults to the polar opposites of love and fear. So it all boils down to that. If you're scared, it's fear. If you're frightened, it's still fear. If you're angry, it's still fear. If you
worry,
it's still fear. The body will transmit on whatever emotional frequency the mind tells it to. It's the mind that is in control. It's the mind that is the driver, the pilot of the ship. The body has no power to edit or change what the mind orders it to transmit. It is simply a vehicle. Simply a vehicle. The Holy Spirit knows that you remain a oneness. Since there is nothing outside the oneness, whatever we send, we will receive. It comes right back.
That's an interesting
thing.
I love that.
The ego, claiming we're not part of the oneness, tells us that the sender is different from the receiver. That can't be true, though. If we knew that all of our thought patterns are projections that simply reflect back on us, we would be very careful about what we chose to send out.
Choose. Yep.
That's what it says. If we knew, is past tense, that all of our thought patterns are projections that reflect back on us, present tense, then we would be very careful about what we choose to send out. Pick your tense. Our thoughts become the projected things we perceive.
And our communications are all boomerangs. The ego's message are always sent or projected away from you in the belief that for your message of attack and guilt, will someone other than you yourself suffer. And even if you suffer, yet someone else will suffer more. The great deceiver, the ego, recognizes that this is not so, and that thoughts do not leave their source. But as the, I'm not sure why it's that way, but as the enemy of peace The ego urges you to send out all your messages of hate and free yourself from your hate by projecting it upon another. It don't work, but it tries to convince us. And to convince you this is possible, the ego bids the body search for pain in attack upon another, calling the pain in attack upon another pleasure, and offering the pain in attack upon another to you as freedom from attack.
Don't believe it. The ego's main tool for our supposed happiness is projection. Projection is the mind's attempt to get rid of something we don't want. We project the undesired thought out of our mind in an attempt to transfer it onto another, like putting on sunglasses. We believe that this undesired thought is outside of our mind and not part of our own egoic thinking. That's why we can get into that victim mode, because it's somebody else's fault. We make the other party the scapegoat of our guilt. To blame another feels better than having to blame ourselves. Unfortunately, since thoughts never leave their source, projection merely conceals the true cause and effect relationship. Rather than understanding that our own mind's thoughts are the cause, it appears that the source of the undesirable event is outside of our mind. We now get to claim that we're innocent victims of the outside world. We can blame someone else for our problems and attack them for the wrong that we have suffered at their hands. That's why ACIM's definition of forgiveness is always to forgive your brother for what you imagine your brother did to you. Both guilt and forgiveness are always an inside job. Ideas never leave their source.
Hey Lee, where do ideas go?
They come right back to us. All healing takes place in our mind, not the communication device that we call the body.
This is becoming more and more clear in this thing. It's just really pretty good between Tom and the ACIM. Hear not the ego's madness that you can escape your own thoughts by projecting them outside your mind, and believe not the impossible is true. Forget not that the ego has dedicated the body to the goal of sin and places in the body all the ego's, come on Lee, stop playing with those crayons. The ego's faith that this goal of sin can be accomplished. The ego's sad disciples, who are those under the egoic thought system, chant the body's praise continually in solemn celebration of the ego's rule. It's very poetic every once in a while. Not one but must believe that yielding to the attraction of guilt is the escape from pain. Not one of the ego's disciples but must regard the body as himself, without which he would die, and yet within which is his death equally inevitable.
To follow the logic of the egoic thought system only leads to belief in pain and ultimately death. Belief in the separation is the belief and desire for sin, guilt, and fear. The wages of the ego's belief in sin is death. Belief that you are the body and that you believe that you are the body and you deny your divine birthright. The ego tells you that you're the body, yet its thought system is powerless to protect your new home from the ego's attacks. In secrecy, the ego plots for your destruction.
It is not given to the ego's disciples to realize that they have dedicated themselves to death. freedom is offered the ego's disciples, but those who follow the egoic thought system have not accepted the Holy Spirit's offer of freedom. And what is offered must also be received to be truly given. For the Holy Spirit, too, is a communication medium, receiving from the Father and offering the Father's message unto the Son. Like the ego, the Holy Spirit is both the sender and the receiver. For what is sent through the Holy Spirit returns to the Holy Spirit, seeking itself along the way and finding what it seeks. So does the ego find the death it seeks, returning death to you if you follow it.
The Holy Spirit sends out the Father's message of the at-one-ment, or the atonement. But to receive the message, we must also be willing to send this same message of the at-one-ment. When we refuse to send the message of guiltlessness of our brother, we refuse to accept the at-one-ment for ourselves. By projecting the message of sin, guilt, fear, and hate to our brother, we get to keep all of these same limitations within our split mind. The Holy Spirit cannot force us to accept the at-one-ment. It must be freely accepted by each one of us. And that's the end
In
of
a
that.
manner of speaking, from the 50,000 viewpoint again, while we isolate, separate, and protect ourselves from the virus, we as spiritual beings, led by the Holy Spirit, seek more and more these types of media, such as Zoom, YouTube, and so on. And it's a blessing that we have them at our disposal. In 1918, 102 years ago, they didn't have that. And over 100 million people, bodies, died. It's amazing that we now have something that enables the minds to continue to transmit and receive communications. In a sense, we can come to realize that we are far healthier now because we are focusing more on what the minds through Zoom and the internet and Facebook give us when it gives us the opportunity to communicate, to continue to communicate with each other, especially about such things as A Course in Miracles. Is that the finish for today?
That's it, man.
So,
Thank you.
okay.